Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Notre Dame Church. I'm Father Tom Denty, the pastor here, and welcome to our special presentation tonight. You know, about 6 years ago, Pope Francis wrote an incredibly powerful letter called Laudato Si, which means on care for our common home. And the entire document was about great concern for the planet and its care. In it, in one part, he wrote, "The universe unfolds in God, who fills it completely. Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, and in the eyes of the poor." Pope Francis was recognizing that we can be led to the presence of God through the beauty of nature and even through the needs of others, by serving our planet and the poor and taking care of the gift of creation. We find the presence of Christ among us, and we imitate God, who is the ultimate creator. And so tonight we have a special presentation, and I'd like to welcome all of you here watching online, as well as several guests who are with us in our Williams Suite tonight. And the event tonight is being hosted by our women's ministry here at Notre Dame. The name of it is Climate Change, What is Happening? What Can I Do About It? And we will be given an overview of the climate crisis as well as ideas of ways we can make a difference. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce our two presenters this evening. Greg and Ian Madison are a father and son team passionate about climate change. They are both members of Climate Reality, as well as the St. Aloysius Green Team. Greg and his wife Connie have produced multiple award-winning TV and radio series devoted to climate change solutions. He is also a veteran presenter on climate-related matters and an adjunct professor of global energy and sustainability at William Patterson University. Ian, a junior honor student at James Caldwell High School, will discuss current concerns presented by the climate crisis, and Greg will facilitate the discussion about initiatives and steps we can take in light of those concerns. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat feature during the presentation. And at the end, Anita Foley, our staff member, will share some of those with our presenters. And so it's my pleasure at this time to hand over the camera and the microphone to Ian.
Thank you, Father Tom. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Let's get into the climate. This message. So this message was sent in by the Apollo 8 crew, and they were the first people to ever send back images taken by a human of Earth outside our atmosphere. My dad and I were just having a talk the other day about how there's a common theme among the autobiographies of the Apollo astronauts. They talk about seeing our home from outside, from out there, from the voidless nothingness of space, and how it inspired them. It made them treasure and want to protect it. They went up as astronauts on a mission of exploration, but came down champions for the planet they stepped away from. If we could all feel what they felt, I believe we would not be having this conversation about the challenges we face today. Hello everyone, my name is Ian Madison, and I'm a junior at James Caldwell High School. I'm a part of the St. Aloysius Green Team, and I'm a member of Troop 6 of Caldwell. I'm here to fight against the unnatural causes, or the unnatural changes that are happening in our climate. I am proud to be a part of the next generation of activists fighting for clean energy. I would like to thank Notre Dame Church, Sheila Fant, Father Tom, and the Women's Ministry for giving me this opportunity for the next step in my journey. We have also learned that Sheila had to miss tonight's presentation due to her daughter who was taken ill, so perhaps we could all remember in our prayers. Thank you, Nita Foley, for stepping in. I hope everyone takes this talk to heart. My future family are counting on you. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about the changes, the good and the bad ones, that we can make. So God gave us the light and this planet, and He charged us with taking care of it. So I'd like to start by asking 3 questions. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? First of all, must we change? Well, yes, we must. The scientific community for quite some time has been telling us that we must change. And why? Well, this is what we have. This is our thin layer of atmosphere. If you walk outside on a sunny day, all you're going to see is limitless sky. But thankfully, to the science and innovation we can see that this is all we have. This is all we get to protect us from space. So we can't treat our air like a sewer. We need to maintain it. But first, let's start with the basics. So, what is our atmosphere? So, we begin, the energy comes from the sun in the form of light. That energy passes through our atmosphere and it's absorbed by the earth, and it causes the planet to warm. That heat is then radiated back into the atmosphere through the form of infrared radiation. But thanks to the greenhouse gases that I just talked about, our atmosphere, it traps some of that heat. And that allows us to have the climate and the weather, and it allows us to live. But if we spew 152 millions of man-made global warming pollution into our atmosphere every day, it adds more carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide and that pollution is a pollution blanket. And that traps heat. So it thickens up our atmosphere, and you can see more heat is trapped. So that is where global warming comes from. It causes the weather to change, and that is the essential cause for all the problems that we are facing right now. And they come from all sorts of places. They come from, you can see, any sort of mining, agriculture, transportation, and our main source is fossil fuels. And you can see that this problem was started about 107 years ago with the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. You can see that the levels of pollution start off slow, and that Mother Nature was able to keep up with us. But until about World War II, right after, Mother Nature starts to run out of ideas to where to put the carbon dioxide. So this is a heat trapping element, so you'd think that temperatures globally would follow, and you can see that the global temperatures follow suit. 19 of the 20 hottest years ever recorded with instruments have happened since 2001. In fact, the hottest year was 2016, and 2020 can actually knock down 2018 for the top 5 because it was another hottest year. I gotta update my slides. And what does a new record look like? Phoenix and Miami both experienced their hottest months ever in July of 2020. And heat in itself is a known problem. It affects not only people, but animals, crops, and weather. You can see this man is being taken away by 2 medical professionals in the city of Boston. I was up in Boston 2 weeks ago. It's nothing that happening too far. It's hidden close to home. So Patriarch Bartholomew and Pope Francis said, "Together we pledge our commitment to raising awareness about the stewardships of creation for the protection of God's world and the benefit of His people." Now I think this quote is important for many reasons. One, when Patriarch Bartholomew and Pope Francis come together, I think we should listen. And they're telling us to be mindful of God's creation. For we have created many a thing that does good to the world, but we also have created many that does not. And we also are aiming to protect the world and the land we live on, but also the oceans we live, that our fish live in too. And not only are surface temperatures going up, but are also the oceans. Heat is trapped in the ocean, and actually most of it is. About 90% of all the extra heat trapped by the atmosphere ends up in our oceans. And heat equals energy. So the more heat you have in the ocean, the more hurricanes you're going to have. So bigger hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones. You can see that on the graph, over the course of 60 years, half of the increase has taken place over the last 20. Now, of course, a lot of you remember Sandy, and it's only been a couple years, and it's one of the biggest storms from my memory. I'm not going to dwell on it now. You can look at the pictures, the losses. We all know, we've all been there. But what I'd like to bring up is the severity. So as the earth warms and the water with it, our energy, like the amount of energy that is in our atmosphere increases. So that allows for more events like Sandy to happen more frequently. So this type of event in 1880 would have been a 1 in 500 year event. When it happened, it's about a 1 to 25 year event. Now, due to the carbon dioxide still going up, if the trend follows, in about 2030 to 2045, it'll be a 1 in 5 year event. So this is a new world. We can't look to history books to tell us that this is natural. And you can see extreme precipitation events have produced more rain and become more common since the 1950s. This is called a rain bomb or a weather bomb. So now this is where we shouldn't show any of the copywritten material, so I ask that the recording just let me know when you're all set. Alright, so, but it's not just hitting close to home. So this is over out in Kentucky, but this is Japan. So 44 people at least were killed in a torrential rain and flooding, causing mudslides. This is Africa. 62 people died and tens of thousands were displaced in just 2 months of flooding. This is Brazil. 30 people were killed at least in landslides in Brazil. Argentina. 5 feet of hail in 15 minutes. That's insane. 15 minutes, and then there's just 5 feet. England, they experienced a lot of flooding in February 2020. 3 major storms, one of them being a weather bomb. Norway. You can see that after torrential rains, that the Norway it's just sliding. There's nothing that can hold on to it. There's so much water. And we need to reconsider how we build our infrastructure. This is a dam in Michigan that collapsed. They're not able to withstand the climate conditions. Here in Michigan, there's a bunch of flooding. It's all over the place. Again, Michigan, we're not prepared to live in the world that we are. Even in Caldwell, this was 2 years ago. You can see water running through the streets. How and where we build is important. How we manage our infrastructure when it comes to water and other natural causes is important. You're good? You can show everything? Alright, so some people ask, how can global warming be changed for droughts along with more precipitation? So, heat being trapped or pollution blanket leads to both. While water is a resource that where it is, if there is more of it in one place, there's normally less of it in another. So while one place is, Kentucky gets rain bombs, Brazil gets droughts and other water shortages. And it shifts with the seasons, spring and fall being wetter and summer being drier. And here you can see, this is June of 2018 in El Salvador, and this is August. So this is just 1 month difference, and you can see how it's way less green. Dry stretches with hotter temperatures have a direct effect on the incidence and severity of wildfires. Here you can see that the large number of fires corresponds with higher temperatures. Today the fire season is actually 100 days longer than it was in the 1970s. And you can see that the fires in 2016 in Canada, it's quite bad. It forced over 100,000 people to relocate. And because of all this extra energy, the damage that it does to the earth is way more severe than it is. With over $160 billion in losses with 2018 alone and $140 billion in 2019 alone. And it does some serious damage. Nature has the power to humble us, you can see. And I love that you can see that Pope Francis said, if we destroy creation, creation will destroy us. Never forget this. So are we paying attention? Because it seems like we're not. This is a normal day in Miami. There's flooding and it hasn't rained a bit. And this happens in not just Miami, but other cities. You can see that the top 10 cities ranked by population are in huge danger. If parts of these cities come uninhabitable, what is the future going to look like? A lot of arguments about immigration policies, but if there's no Miami or if there's no major cities that are now flooded, what are we going to do? The U.S. Department of Defense sees it as a major problem. Climate change will likely lead to food and water shortages, pandemic disease, disputes over refugees and resources, and destruction by natural disasters in regions across the globe. So God has blessed us with so much, and He asked us that we looked after His gifts. So keep them alive with thee, Genesis 6:19. So He asks us to keep us alive, but we are at risk of losing 50% of all land-based species this year, or in this century. This is called the Anthropocene, and it means that it's a period in where humans are the primary influence to the climate and the environment. So I'm taking basic in economics, learning about budgets, profit, and investments, and all these threats have costs. So how many times do we need to say to stop investing in fossil fuels? We don't have the time to go into all the problems with carbon, but the World Economic Forum says climate change is the biggest threat to the global economy. So back to our first question. Must we change? Yes, we must change. And I hope I've convinced you that we must, because now I would like to hand it over to my father to finish up the presentation.
Thank you, Ian. So, this is the first time that I'm presenting with Ian. So you know, he's a remarkable young man. You know, both of our children are remarkable. You know, as a parent, it's my responsibility to provide, you know, love and support, to provide a safe and stable home, to try to provide as many opportunities to my children as I can possibly muster, and you know, ultimately where those opportunities take them is up to them. But I can't help feeling that in these same respects, we're letting our kids down. You know, a safe and stable home. The earth is our home. And extreme weather that is being caused by climate change is making that home less safe and less stable. Every species that goes extinct is a lost opportunity for us to connect with creation There's lost opportunities for us to learn from life, the other life on this planet. There's a lost opportunity to appreciate the beauty that's there. Every bridge, every house, every road, the infrastructure that gets destroyed from these storms, these things have to be rebuilt after the floods and the windstorms. And those are resources that are being stolen from schools or other more noble aspirations that we could pursue. There's an opportunity cost. Those are stolen opportunities. And I feel that our children should feel like they can stand on our shoulders and go further, not follow behind us cleaning up our mess and our mistakes. So it's for that reason that I'm here today, to ask you to join us in fighting for the changes that we need, so that we can create new opportunities from these problems, so that we can focus on the good that must be done and not just the tears that need to be shed. So back to the question of, can we change? So I've been advocating for clean energy for over 20 years. And I can tell you that I've never been more optimistic about where we are going and how quickly we can get there. Our pollution problem is one of our own creation. And so it follows that we also have the power to fix this problem ourselves. To understand the problem simply, this is an energy problem. It's about how we create, how we store, how we distribute, and how we use energy. That is what has put us in the position that we're in. So first, we need to create energy without adding to that pollution blanket that Ian talked about. So looking back over the last 20 years, we can see that in the case of wind generation, we've made a dramatic transformation in the last 20 years. There's a question of, is there enough renewable energy to meet the demand that we have? Wind alone could supply 40 times over the global consumption of energy. Now, as we grow we recognize economies of scale. The more there is, the cheaper it gets. And in fact, we've already solved one of the first major problems with renewable energy. We've now made it cheap enough to compete with fossil fuels on price. And we'll speak more about that in just a minute. Now, as we're starting to produce renewable energy on a scale that is significant now, this statistic here, renewables produced 56% of Germany's electricity in the first half of 2020. It's not enough, but it's significant progress. There's even more explosive growth when we look at solar energy. Again, seeing the cost come down, it's important to recognize that arguments about renewable energy being too expensive, those are born of a bygone era. We need to look at current data to help guide our choices. Sure, if you were paying $79 a watt, I can see where you would view solar energy as being too expensive. But when you're paying 20 cents a watt, now you're at parity with what you're paying for fossil fuel energy, and that's a very different discussion. Looking at how quickly this is unfolding, in 2014, electricity from solar and wind was cheaper than new coal plants in approximately 1% of the world. By 2019, only 5 years later, solar and wind provided the cheapest sources of new electricity in 2/3 of the world. And looking forward just 3 years from now, these sources are expected to provide the cheapest electricity throughout the entire world. another quote from Pope Francis. The gravest effects of all the attacks on the environment are suffered by the poorest. Now, this is certainly true when you look at the devastating environmental impacts of the climate crisis. One of the reasons that when a typhoon slams into the developing world and levels, something like the Philippines, one of the reasons that they're less resilient is because they don't have access to abundant sources of energy, to run pumps, to field their hospitals, and those kind of things. So if we're honest about the way that we produce and distribute energy, our current methodology has a history of plundering and then excluding the developing world. So that injustice affects the health, the education, the security, the quality of life of everybody on the planet, but particularly the poorest. Renewable energy is a potential remedy to some of this injustice in that it's easily scalable and it's cheap to operate. So it works from a distributed model where you can put your generation wherever the resource is. So this allows people who were otherwise kept out of the centralized production, fossil fuel fed energy world. It allows those people to now have access to power for the first time. And this has the potential to dramatically change the quality of life for millions of people. While we're at it, enough solar energy reaches the world every hour to fill the world's energy needs for a year. So can we meet our energy needs with renewables? Yes, we can. These are changes in how we create energy in Europe. These are the changes that we see in the United States. And we can see here where policy and leadership makes a difference. We're a democracy. The will of the people and of the consumer change the shape of this pie chart. And affecting this pie chart is a big part of why I'm here. So in your day-to-day life, you just want the lights to come on. You just want your refrigerator to stay cool. For too long, we have wanted those things, but we didn't think about what made them happen, what made that happen. So now, we need to become active participants in the choice of how to get the energy that we want. We need voices of the people to stand up and demand that we get our energy from clean sources. The Vatican has become the first city-state to get all of its energy without the pollution of fossil fuels. So some people might say they could do it because they had God on their side. Maybe so. But I also think that we can attribute that to a lot of prudent management choices from the leadership. There are challenges to renewable energy. So in a renewable energy world, instead of having a stockpile of stored energy, fuel, that you could use anytime, renewables function because they take advantage of flows of energy that already exist. Wind, or the sun shining. So that means we need the ability to store that energy temporarily until we need it. So incidentally, adding additional storage, even to our current energy paradigm, would reduce an immense amount of waste. We currently run our power plants 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for peak demand. We dig up our coal, we ship it across the country, we bring it to a power plant, and we burn it just in case you turn the lights on. If you don't turn the lights on, we've still burned that coal. So, it just doesn't make sense. We think that we have a solution that's working for us. Is it really working for us the way that we think it is? There's so much we don't know. In order to move this power around the country, we need to think about our infrastructure. These are existing and planned high voltage power lines. These orange lines are existing high voltage power lines. And we need to improve how we move power. So these are planned high voltage lines. And you can see they span across multiple states. There is currently an east-west divide in our country where we separate our power grids from the east and the west. We're looking now at new lines that would bridge the country. So in these discussions about infrastructure that are going around in politics now, a lot of that, there's significant money towards developing a national power grid. And the reason this is important is because you have these flows of energy. This is where these resources are most abundant. That's not to say that we don't have wind in New Jersey. I'm sure some of you have probably seen the Atlantic City wind farm. There's talk about offshore wind development. This particular map is only looking at onshore development. But we can see that these are the areas where these resources are most abundant. And so we really need to think about this on a holistic sense. How do we move this energy and how do we take advantage of this energy that is already there? And incidentally, we'd probably be well served to also think about a national water network so that when places like the Northeast are getting an overabundance of water, wouldn't it be great if we could move that through pipelines out to the Midwest where maybe they're not getting as much water? So these are the kind of more holistic things that we need to be thinking about when we plan for our infrastructure. So we need to choose renewable energy, and I encourage you to investigate something called the 100% Renewable Campaign, and see if you could maybe get your town to commit, as these towns have, to getting 100% of their energy from renewable sources. So these are the ones who have committed to getting renewable energy in the future for 100% of their power, and these are the cities that already are getting 100% of their energy from renewable sources. So, can we change? Yes, we can change. Will we change? So we can see that change is really, it's inevitable. It's happening regardless whether anybody in this room chooses to participate actively. The real question is, will we change in the ways that you feel are needed? And here's the thing, we all have the power to shape that change through our ideas, through our effort, through our voices, and through the choices that we make. In 2014, 400,000 people marched before the United Nations General Assembly, before they convened, to send a message that climate response is important and it matters to the people. So Ian was home with the flu at the time, so that little yellow banner there about the future, that's the banner right back there, that's Ian's sister. So she was with us marching through the streets of Manhattan. And I have to tell you, that was a lot of people walking through the streets of New York. We marched right down Broadway, past Radio City, past Trump Tower, right through the center of the city, right down through Times Square. But then when we marched on Washington a few years later, would you like to bring us home?
So when we were in Washington a few years later, I did end up going. And I met some pretty cool people. I met Richard Branson, Al Gore, Climate Reality, he's our guy. But we're using our voices. So I ask everybody here and watching to join those of us who are using our voices, our votes, and our choices to fight for our future, our community, and our world. So use your voice, your vote, and your choices to speak truth to power, like the world depends on it. Because my world depends on it, your world depends on it, and our world depends on it. Thank you.
Okay. This is Anita speaking. And we have some questions and comments, so let's see if I can read these people's writing. It's going to be hard. Okay, here we go, but thank you, first of all, for giving us a lot to think about. Thank you. One comment I have is that I was writing down things that made me feel positive. So I loved when you said that if we created the problem, we can solve the problem. I think that's very empowering. And I like when you said the will of the people and consumer can make changes. I think the more we can feel empowered, that gives me the energy and the hope. I think it gives us a sense of hope. Okay, so here are some questions. Are there any state laws being made or being discussed that will have a big impact on our lives? This is coming from the back table. So if I say it wrong, could you correct me? Okay. And then she adds, I feel like recycling is more of a personal choice at the moment. Although renewable energy is being implemented on a national scale, why don't we see it more on a local scale? Could you comment on that?
Okay, lots of good points in there. So, are there laws that are being considered that are significant? Always. There's a few different ways we can slice that up. If you look at New Jersey, for example, Governor Corzine, many years ago, actually established a renewable energy portfolio standard. And what he said was, on an increasing scale, by 2030, we need to get a certain portion of our energy from renewable energy. And so there's a little bit of a carrot and a stick with that, but essentially what he was trying to do was encourage the utility companies to start adding renewable energy to their portfolio over time. So it's a law that is requiring utilities to slowly increase the amount of renewable energy in their portfolio. When you look at the solar panels on the utility poles, when you drive down the street and you see the telephone poles now have little solar panels up on top, that is an outgrowth of that push. You know, the utility companies, they have a kind of a model that's working for them. They're profitable. They're trying to maintain their business. They're not going to change unless there is some kind of a push from either the people or the government to move them in a direction. So those type of portfolio standards are important. And those arose because people said it was important. So again, the will of the people influenced the politicians, who then passed the laws, and those laws then drive change. You mentioned recycling. A lot of people don't realize that recycling in New Jersey actually is the law. Municipalities have a great deal of latitude in terms of how they participate, but by law you are supposed to recycle in New Jersey. Where laws exist and where laws are enforced are two different things. So you can have laws. There's a great deal of environmental regulation that exists that is not enforced, and people pollute. So We don't always need to think about new laws. In many cases, we can just look at the good ideas that are already there, but then providing the resources that those laws are either communicated to people so that they're aware of what they should be doing, or the resources to enforce those laws. And in many cases with something like recycling, it comes down to convenience. So although it may be the law that I have to recycle, boy, if it's going to require me to load all my cans and bottles into my car and drive them over to the recycling center because they don't come to my house to pick them up, but there's a nice convenient garbage can right there, I can just put that stuff in there and close it up and nobody's going to go through my garbage bag and sort that out. Boy, that's sure a lot more convenient. Just one little anecdote. In the town of Montclair, where we used to live, they had what was called a set-out set-back program for all the trash. So you would put your trash in your garbage can in your backyard. The garbage men would come, and big strong garbage guys would walk up your driveway and get the can for you and drag it down the driveway and dump it for you every week. Your recycling, you had to drag out to the curb to put out, and they would come by and pick it up. So the town was faced with a choice. Do we make it just as easy to recycle, meaning that those big strong men are going to now go up your driveway twice a week? Or their solution was, you know what, hang on. When we step back and take a look at this, that's a really expensive endeavor to keep going. That's a lot of man hours up and down every driveway. That's a lot of idling of these trucks sitting out in front of the house while we're waiting for these guys to walk back and forth. That's a lot of fuel spent. So hang on a second. It's going to be a lot cheaper for the town if we just say, we don't go do the set-out setback anymore. You've got to bring everything out to the curb. You know, if you're a senior or you're disabled, we'll still have that as a service that you can opt into. But everybody, now everything is on the same playing field, excuse me. When they did that, participation in recycling exploded. They had to actually increase the amount of recycling pickups for the town because it wasn't easier to recycle, but it was just as hard to recycle as it was to throw something away. So we just need to be creative about how we think about things.
Okay, here's another question. This is what is the impact of landfills on the atmosphere as compared to fossil fuels? Is the damage reversible, or is it a matter of taking action to minimize further damage?
So there's a lot of issues with landfills and with waste. We could talk about that in the sense of pollution into the groundwater and the toxic leaching that goes into the soil. But if we just keep to the topic of emissions in the atmosphere, as things decompose, they release methane. Methane is about 120 times stronger than carbon in terms of its heat trapping strength. The good thing about methane is that it tends to degrade in the atmosphere rather quickly, and it only stays in the atmosphere for about a decade before it breaks down and comes back down. Whereas carbon dioxide can stay in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. So that's why, you know, it's kind of the short, strong game or the long game. So, I'm sorry, can you just give me that again in terms of?
Is the damage reversible, or is it a matter of taking action to minimize further damage?
Yeah, so I mean, you want to be careful. We don't think a lot about the things we throw away, right? And we have a very disposable society. So, and I think that the people who sell us products bear some responsibility in thinking about the end of life of the things that they sell us. I can go to Home Depot today and buy a great many things that I really should not be putting back out into the environment. And nobody is checking what I'm doing when I'm buying that. Nobody is following up with me to see if I'm using them responsibly. Not to get down on Home Depot, but I'm just saying that the products that we buy we are capable of buying products that are incredibly toxic. And we are not always responsible about what we do with those things when we're done with them. And a lot of times we don't even realize how toxic they are when we introduce them back into the environment. So can they be cleaned up? Yeah, but better to not put them there in the first place.
All right, here's a really good one. Do our cell phones cause pollution?
So cell phones fall under the category of e-waste, electronic waste. And there's some really nasty stuff in our electronics. Cancer-causing things, radioactive things, heavy metals. You know, we're certainly familiar with things like mercury being poisonous to us and affecting our brains. Lead, cadmium, all these things are in our electronics. So there is pollution to be generated in the mining of these elements, in the manufacture of these components, and then again when we dispose of them. You need to be very mindful of how you dispose of electronics. Essex County has e-waste disposal days. They also have hazardous waste disposal days. So for things like paints, solvents, cleaners. And all you need to do is look on the Essex County site. I think the e-waste is actually, I think it's either this month or next month, actually. Do you know when it is?
Yeah, I think it's coming up. I think you're right. I was looking at it sometime this month.
Yeah. So, so you know, we keep a little pile of old printers or cell phones or whatever it is. Increasingly, manufacturers are starting to feel the push on that. So I know Apple will take some of their products back for clean disposal. Dell will take some of their products back. So yeah, there is pollution to be made from your electronics for sure.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. This person says, great presentation with lots of great information. What could each of us do to reduce carbon dioxide emissions?
Got any thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a couple things you can do. So you can cut out meat from your diet. We were actually just talking about this. Agriculture is a strong source of methane. Not leaving, I mean the simple stuff when it comes to turning off the light when you leave the room, or not leaving the water running while you brush your teeth. You hear that a lot. That's what I can think of.
So I approach it a lot like if you were going to balance your budget at home, you could track every little expense that you make. Or you can look at the big things, like your mortgage and your insurance, the big chunks. If you can get the big stuff in line first, you're gonna get a lot farther down that road to balancing your budget and you're going to expend a lot less energy trying to do it. So if we want to reduce our carbon footprint, what I would suggest is that you first start by looking at where do you use the most energy. And I can tell you it's going to be in heating your home, cooling your home, your refrigeration. And the state of New Jersey, the Board of Public Utilities, actually has incentive programs to, as part of the governor's initiative that we talked about earlier, to increase efficiency in the state. So you can get a home energy audit. And in a lot of cases, you can get that energy audit done for free or subsidized, where a professional will come, they'll evaluate your house and they'll see where in your house are you using the most energy. And then they'll give you a proposal that says, if you do X, Y, and Z, this is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. We're actually talking with the Archdiocese about doing something similar for the Catholic diocese. So they can come to our parishes, they can come to our schools. And look, because I mean, I'm sure you walk into some of these Catholic schools, it's like they haven't been modernized in some time, and they're not particularly efficient. But if we could actually, what they'll do is they'll give us a proposal that says, we can guarantee you this much energy savings. And so we'll allow you to borrow against your future savings, to take out a loan for free, knowing that it'll be paid back with the energy that you don't use. So it's an amazing program that we have here in New Jersey that more people need to take advantage of.
Great, thank you. And here's our last question. We have a bunch of questions, but we just want to be conscious of our time. This is regarding wind. Wind can supply 40 times over the world's energy. What does this look like? How many wind farms do we need, and where do they go?
Mm-hmm. So that is the big question, right? In terms of like the resources there, what are we prepared to compromise on in order to get to where we are, so where we want to be? So any energy that we produce is going to require some type of compromise. What we're realizing is that we didn't recognize the compromises that we have been making for the last 150 years. We just didn't think about it. We got the energy and we didn't think about what were we giving up to get that energy. It's just becoming apparent to us. Oh my goodness, we're giving up a lot. We're potentially giving up our ability to survive on this planet. You know, we didn't even realize. So, with respect to renewable energy, are we going to have to give up some space, some of our open spaces, to allow for the footprint of renewable energy? We are. I mean, that is, you know, you are going to see our energy generation. Now it's kind of nice, you know, a coal plant, we can kind of tuck it away somewhere or put it down in the industrial section. Very often we stick it into poor neighborhoods where people, you know, don't get to complain about the things that we're dumping in their backyard, frankly. So that's the way things work now. As we start to put it where the resources are, it's likely that you're going to see them. So, you know, offshore wind, you know, there we have the beauty of prevailing breezes because there's a temperature disparity between the water and the land. So you've always got either inflowing or outflowing breezes along the coastline. That's why it's a really attractive place to put wind turbines. Does that mean that in some cases when you go to the beach, off in the distance, you would be likely to see wind turbines? Yeah, that would be the compromise. So what would it look like to fully develop wind? I don't know, that would be a lot of wind turbines. In our area, there's not that many places that are really robust for wind development. So for us in the Northeast, you wouldn't see a lot. There's also a lot of really open spaces where there aren't people, where these things can go, where they make sense, and that's where that grid starts to be important. Farmers are realizing that you can have wind turbines on your farm and still do agriculture underneath them. So it's actually a boon to a lot of farmers. They're seeing themselves not only as farmers, but as energy producers. It's like a concurrent business that you can run, and it's very hard to make your living as a farmer in a lot of cases. And actually what's allowing a lot of people to hold on to their homestead is the ability to have a secondary business where they're generating power on their farms. So.
Great, thank you so much for answering those questions. And thank you for being with us tonight. Father Tom is going to bring this to a close with a prayer.
Well, thank you very much again, Ian and Greg, for your wonderful presentation about a very important topic. You know, we talk about modern prophets in our world, and certainly this father and son team is a modern prophet speaking an important message, a challenging message, but a hopeful message, and one that we can participate in by doing our part to make the world a better place, literally. By the way, Notre Dame does participate in some of those programs that they mentioned through the Archdiocese. The Archdiocese does assist parishes by connecting them with grants and other programs to help make places more energy efficient. Just this past year, all the lighting in our parish center was changed to more energy efficient lighting, and we got new air conditioning units, greatly discounted, to use for the parish center that are, again, way more energy efficient and produce less pollution. So we're trying to do our part, but as always, when you finish one thing, you have to ask, what can we do next? I want to say an extra word of gratitude to Anita Foley from our staff, who's the coordinator of the women's ministry, and Sheila Fant, who, as was mentioned earlier, isn't with us tonight, but it was definitely a key person in putting this evening together. A word of gratitude to Mike Tedesco, our music director, but tonight he's our tech guy. And Kristen Mautone, our youth minister, is here as well. She brought some young people along to hear the message too. Here at the parish we have a nice resource called Catholic Update, which gives a summary of Pope Francis and the environment, his document. If you're interested in these, they're here at the church, or if you want one right away, give us a call during the week and we'll mail one right to your home. At the end of the Pope's document, he wrote a prayer for the earth. So it seems very appropriate that we conclude our evening tonight with this prayer. So let us pray. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, hurting no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain, at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey toward your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
And may Almighty God bless us all, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.